Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is Friday, the 10th of March, 2023, the end of the week. Lots to discuss with you. Without further ado, these are the topics that will be part of our show tonight. The first will be, of course, Chinese President Xi Jinping, who has secured a precedent-breaking third five-year term as President of the People's Republic of China. This is a huge success for Xi Jinping, and of course we have seen his not only rise to power but also the way he has handled not only his country, the People's Republic of China, but also the relations that he has strengthened between his country and even countries such as Pakistan, and how China has been at the forefront in helping Pakistan in times of need and in the good times as well. Nearly 3,000 members of the National People's Congress, China's largest ceremonial parliament, voted unanimously for Xi Jinping after the constitution was changed to remove the traditional two-term limit for the post. What does this mean for China and for world politics? This is going to be our first segment. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the Ukraine-Russia conflict. It has been 380 days since this conflict began and shows no sign of stopping. As per certain sources, there are indications that this is going to be a long drawn-out event. What repercussions it is going to have? What are the already issues that are penetrating the region, these countries at conflict, and the world at large? This is going to be part of our second segment. And then we'll be talking about the United States of America, Ned Price, who says that it supports constructive dialogue between Pakistan and India to remove outstanding disputes. During a media briefing at the White House, Ned Price said that the United States of America supports constructive dialogue and that we support diplomacy between the two countries. It has already highlighted that many a times before as well, but it's India that is not doing the needful. That is come to the talks table and discuss all the issues, the thorny issue especially, and that the issue of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Let's begin with our first segment that concerns Xi Jinping and his third term as President of the People's Republic of China, a third five-year term, and of course all the members of the Chinese parliament who voted unanimously for Xi Jinping. How important is this for China? How important is it for the world? More in the following report.
Geopolitical tensions have spiraling over the past several months between great powers, culminating in the United States shot down a Chinese spy balloon over its territory in early February. The recent remarks by Chinese President Xi Jinping and the new Chinese foreign minister certainly point to rising temperatures in Sino-US relations. President Xi commented that the United States is leading the containment, encirclement, and suppression of China, adding that his country must have the courage to fight. In separate comments, Chinese foreign minister Qin Gang spoke of conflict and confrontation between his country and the United States, warning of catastrophic consequences if Washington continued on its current path. Amid brewing Sino-US tensions, there is unprecedented development in China as Xi Jinping was unanimously elected President of People's Republic of China and Chairman of the Central Military Commission of the PRC at the ongoing session of the 14th National People's Congress. The announcement was followed by fervent declarations by delegates to the Chinese constitution in demonstration of loyalty and unanimity. Xi's re-election is the zenith of a remarkable rise in which he has become a leader of a rising global power. The beginning of his unprecedented third term comes as the world's second largest economy is navigating strained ties with US and Ukraine crisis in exacerbating geopolitical fault lines.
We've been joined by former Ambassador and Foreign Affairs expert Masood Khalid Saab. Thank you very much, sir, to have joined us. It's a pleasure to have you on board for this very important discussion. Xi Jinping, President for a third five-year term, unanimously elected by the members of the Chinese parliament. In one of his quotes and his address across the nation that was televised live, he has vowed to build a prosperous, a strong, a democratic, a civilized, harmonious, and a great modern socialist country. How is China going to be shaped under the presidency, a third-time presidency of Xi Jinping?
Thank you, Mr. Bhatt. Thank you very much. I think this is a historic development, unprecedented, no doubt, in China's context, that President Xi Jinping has been, re-elected for the third term, because, as you would know, in the Chinese constitution, there was a provision for 2 consecutive tenures of the president. So this constitution was amended. Hence, unanimously, President Xi Jinping has assumed his third term. Now, what it signifies, I think, no doubt, it is a historical development, but it also shows that the party, it is not an individual's decision. It is the party the ruling party, Communist Party of China, which in its wisdom decides that the leadership of President Xi Jinping at this point in time, given the domestic challenges, given the external challenges which China faces, is required. So, as you are rightly pointed out, that President Xi Jinping has made his mark in the last 10 years, both internally and externally on the foreign policy realm and domestic. For example, he has taken many initiatives. If we talk of the foreign policy domain, then of course the BRI, of which Pakistan is also a part as, due to CPAC, then this latest initiatives of global security initiative and global development initiatives. And domestically, acute poverty has been addressed. 13 million people, are provided employment every year in China. This has been the target which Chinese Communist Party has been able to achieve. And when you compare, when he assumed power in 2012, the Chinese GDP was slightly over $8 trillion. Now it is more than $17 trillion. So you can see the achievement and the accomplishment of the party it is delivering. Now, how China will achieve its national targets, China is very clear. By 2049, China wants to become a modern, as you said, modern, prosperous, democratic, harmonious society, a socialist society. Now, when they talk of Chinese society, they always mention Chinese socialism with Chinese characteristics, which means that whatever model is being evolved, it is in accordance with Chinese culture, Chinese traditions. It's a unique governance model. That is what it's meant. Now, but if you look at the total picture, we know that China is facing challenges. There was a slowdown of, economy due to this
And
COVID.
I think in 2023, Masood Saab, the expectation is of around 5%, if I'm not wrong.
That's right, 5% growth rate, which is not bad, despite the setback which Chinese economy received. But China has internal issues like the demographic, complexity. Then there is also a question of internal debt. But these are domestic challenges, domestic issues, which I'm sure, because the party is very focused. My experience is that they are not only cognizant of these challenges and upcoming problems, but then they devise a methodology, a planning process to deal with these issues. And so far, China has delivered. CPC has delivered. Hence, this, sense of satisfaction amongst the Chinese people over the party's leadership. Now, coming to
Ambassador Sir, before we come to the challenges, I'd like to understand what this third-time presidency, which is a very unique third-time presidency for any Chinese leader, and of course for Xi Jinping, it's very important in the current context, as you've explained. What does it bode for the region that China is present in? What does it bode for China-Pakistan relations? What does it bode also for the tensions that exist, A, between maybe China and India, and secondly, the tensions and the challenges that China has as far as its relationship with the US is concerned?
Well, you are coming to the foreign policy realm now. Okay, good. Now, as far as China-Pakistan relations are concerned, you would recall that this CPAC project was initiated by President Xi Jinping in 2013. And when he came here in April 2015, that this project was launched it gained momentum. And the results are before us. Despite challenges, despite difficulties, despite hiccups, we have been able to, again, because of this initiative. So because this is a pilot project, a signature project of BRI, I'm sure that the Chinese government as well as Pakistan government both are committed to pursue this project and achieve and attain the targets which have been prescribed. Now, so from that point of view, if you talk of CPAC, I think it's a good sign for us that President Xi Jinping has been re-elected, and his government will continue to give due attention to this project. Then come to, Pakistan-China relations are very broad-based. We are also cooperating in the field of, for example, civilian nuclear field, these Chashma power plants, talk of co-production of JF-17 and other projects, important projects, which are being, and then the CPAC is now entered into second phase. So the platter is big. We are now talking of cooperation in agriculture, IT, science and technology, etc. So since President Xi Jinping has dealt with all the leaders during the past 10 years of Pakistan, he knows Pakistan quite well. He knows Pakistan's leadership. He knows Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. He knew the previous leadership also. So my point is that he is fully in command of what Pakistan's requirements are, what Pakistan's challenges are, and how important this relationship. China has always attached high priority to its relations with Pakistan in the context of neighborhood diplomacy. And Pakistan also attaches high importance to this relationship. This is the convergence because of multiple factors. So this track will continue as far as bilateral relations. Rather, I hope that we will see more exchanges, high-level exchanges. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif visited China a few months ago, but hopefully now that the COVID is behind us, things are stabilizing. We hope that in 2023 we will see Chinese leaders coming to Pakistan, which will give a nudge and impetus to our bilateral cooperation. Now, China-India relations. I come to that. China-India relations are not stable because of a variety of factors. The core being this border issue between the two countries. Now they are neighbors. China has been striving to have normal relationship, peaceful coexistence with its neighbors, including with India. And if you look at the history, there is a record showing that China reached out even in 1960-61 to conclude a border treaty with India, but it failed. Now again, the border tensions are there. Then this, illegal renunciation of the autonomy status of Jammu and Kashmir territory by India in August 2019. It has added another serious irritant. So my point is, and then, of course, the biggest, that despite Chinese efforts to reach out to India, if you go back, 5 years behind in 2015, 2016, you could see that there were exchanges between the Prime Minister of India and President Xi Jinping. There were visits, etc., etc. But things boiled up. Now, Indians have concluded a strategic partnership with the United States, and they are part of that China containment strategy of the United States. So obviously, this is a big issue between the two countries. Now, their trade is good. I think economically, trade-wise, that may continue, although recently India has taken a lot of measures, punitive measures against Chinese companies in India. So let's see, because I think for the region, for regional stability and peace, it is important that relationship between China and India improves. So let's see. One can't say, but right now, uncertain, unstable, and lack of trust between the two sides.
Another area where there's a lack of trust is between People's Republic of China and the United States of America. There's a huge tension between the two countries. Also, the fact that China is close to Russia and supports Russia through thick and thin also irks the US, on top of many other issues. And of course, it's the rising popularity and strength of China as well. How can both the countries balance it out under this new presidential term of Xi Jinping? Do you feel there is certain possibility for both countries to sit down and to thaw out the issues that remain between them?
You see, President Biden and President Xi Jinping met, a couple of months ago, and there was a hope that things will, the rhetoric will come down, things will stabilize, but that has not happened. because there has been an increased escalation of, uh, exchanges between China and the United States, and U.S. Congress, U.S. media, uh, U.S. administration has taken a number of measures in recent weeks and recent months, which are perceived by China, as President Xi Jinping said, encircling of China, suppression of China. So this is the perception which is growing. So this rivalry is growing, and it is now reaching a point where it could sort of, I mean, it could be a tipping point. There could be
But in this tipping
confrontation.
point, final
Taiwan,
question to,
Taiwan at the same
in
time.
this whole situation where there's a tipping relationship that is on its tipping point with the US, where there are other issues of content thorny issues with the India that are not seeing any positive sign at the end of the day. How do you feel Xi Jinping in this third term of presidency is going to deal with this in such a manner that could not only strengthen China as a leading country in the global committee of nations, but also make it a country that speaks and seeks wisdom?
Well, you have just seen the news today. I'm sure that China has brokered reconciliation between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And they are resuming their diplomatic ties. Now, this is a major achievement. This is a major breakthrough. And
I
China has
totally agree.
played that role. So you see, China's profile under Xi Jinping has improved a lot globally, economically, politically, diplomatically. And China voices its China sides with the global south, with the developing countries, poor countries, and it is helping them. If you see the record of Chinese assistance to developing countries, be it Africa, Latin America, here in Central Asia, Pakistan. Look at how China has come forward to help us with these economic challenges recently. So that is the kind of profile which I think China will maintain and pursue. As far as this, potential conflict with the United States is concerned, I think Chinese are pragmatic. Chinese are practical. Chinese leadership thinks through things. They are not trigger happy. They would like to avoid a conflict, a physical conflict with the United States at all costs, because China has gained a lot economically in the last 4 decades. And China has its national targets of rejuvenation, natural rejuvenation by 2049. China does not want to squander that. The primary reason for Xi Jinping's re-election is also the continuity of that leadership, which takes China in that particular direction. But if this thing is derailed due to a confrontation, a military clash between China and the United States, and leads to a war, it will be catastrophic. And Taiwan is a flashpoint, I'm telling you. And there could be a skirmish which can get out of control because miscalculation.
Let's hope, Masood Saab, it doesn't come to that. Let's hope that
Well,
sanity prevails, wisdom prevails, and looking at the sagacity of the Chinese leadership in the past as well, on how it has
But it has
handled
to be a
important
two-way traffic,
issues.
Mr. Butt. It has to be a two-way traffic. Chinese sagacity
I
alone.
agree with you. I agree with you. Thank you so very much, Masood Khalid Saab, to have joined us, to have talked to us about China, about Mr. Xi Jinping, about his third time presidency, and how important is this third term as president, which is, of course, a unique first time opportunity for Mr. Xi Jinping and for the People's Republic of China as well, to not only strengthen China, but also strengthen its relationships with other countries in the region, and of course, turning in a new page as far as global affairs and the relationships of China with other important global players are concerned. Let's come to our second story, which concerns the Ukraine-Russia crisis. 380 days have passed since this crisis began, and this crisis shows no sign of abating. In fact, there are some sources that even say that this is going to be a long, drawn-out conflict. More in the following report.
The conflict in Ukraine has dramatically changed the world and is shaping future of Europe and global security order in decisive manner. The intense fighting around eastern city of Bakhmut has been the longest and bloodiest in more than a year-long Ukraine conflict, which has devastated swaths of Ukraine and displaced millions of people. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg warned that the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut may fall into Russian hands in the coming days after months of intense fighting. Ukraine's military said it had managed to push back intense Russian attacks on the city of Bakhmut despite a Russian claim of control over its eastern half. According to Ukrainian officials, Russian missiles hit several cities across Ukraine, including the capital Kiev, the Black Sea port of Odessa, and the northeastern city of Kharkiv. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres visited Kiev for talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on extending grain shipments from the war-torn country and securing the safety of nuclear power plant. Meanwhile, European Union foreign ministers gathered in Stockholm with a push to provide more ammunition to Ukraine forces high on their agenda. With fighting raging on and no peace talks on the horizon, Ukraine conflict has become most challenging geopolitical flashpoint which threatens to escalate great power tensions.
Taimur Khan, Research Associate with the ISSI, joins us online. Taimur, thank you very much to have joined us. Taimur, 380 days since this conflict began, and as per certain sources, Russia does not want to end this conflict anytime soon. It might go even beyond 2 years. What would be the consequences of that? If we look at from the point of view of food security, when we look at it from a point of view of energy and fuel consumption, when we look at it from a point of view of general security of the region, what are your apprehensions?
First of all, thank you so much for having me on your show again. But initially, it was not even envisioned by Russian authorities that the war would be extended beyond a year's time. It was only envisioned by the Russian leadership that they would be able to take over Kiev in a matter of few weeks or a couple of months at best. But now here we are after more than 12 months and the war continues to persist. And in my humble opinion, if the war continues to rage on, I think its consequences will be catastrophic for international peace and security, especially for the energy and food security that currently poses as a grave challenge for the international community. And this will also further exacerbate the global power competition that is currently manifesting itself in different parts of the globe, particularly between major powers such as Russia and the US and China, so on and so forth. So it will be detrimental for the international peace and security, and the developing world or the global south will be the biggest victim of this global power competition if this war continues to persist. And furthermore, it will also, manifest in the reorientation of different global supply chains and different global bloc politics as well. As we can see that after the Russia-Ukraine war, the world has experienced an initiation of Cold War 2.0, as it is being connotated in the current vocabulary of the international relations jargon, that the world has entered into a new Cold War and new bloc politics is taking place, and the world is again being divided between different blocs being led by different major powers of the world. One belonging to the collective West led by the United States of America, and the other more of an Asian bloc being led primarily by China and the second power like Russia. So I think that if this war continues to persist, there will be more divide in the nation states around the world, and there will be more polarization in global politics, which will be detrimental for the international peace and security.
You spoke of China, you spoke of Russia. A lot of articles that I've gone through talk about the future of the relationship of these two important players and how long will Beijing continue to support Russia under the current circumstances. What's your take on that?
Well, I think Russia and China had their own respective national security long-term interests, especially vis-a-vis each other. But the United States policy orientation towards both these countries, especially after the publication of its latest national security strategy document, where it categorically stated that the biggest national security threat to the United States of America are revisionist states like Russia and China. So before it was only it was considering Russia as a rival and China as a competitor, but in its latest national security strategy, United States had categorically declared both of these states a national security threat. So the US policy orientation towards both these emerging or established global powers or different power centers have also brought both of these global powers to have a symbiotic relationship, because enemy of my enemy is a friend. So since the United States has declared both of these global powers as its nemesis, so both of them have decided to come together to counter the United States threat to their national security interests. So I think that as the United States will continue with its current policy of declaring both of these countries as its major threats and rivals, the symbiotic partnership between both these countries will continue to flourish, and I think it will only strengthen with time.
All right. About Ukraine becoming a flashpoint and, of course, detrimental for the region, do you feel this flashpoint could become a nuclear flashpoint as well? There were a lot of question marks in the recent past as well about Russia maybe trying to use its nuclear capabilities. And, of course, if one starts, there will be a reaction to that as well. Is there any danger of that?
Of course, there is a very high probability of this conflict turning into a nuclear flashpoint, because primarily from the Russian side, because the Russian leadership has reiterated time and again that if its national security interests are jeopardized, or its mainland is attacked, or if it faces a threat of a strategic defeat in its war against Ukraine, President Putin has stated that he will use any and all means available at his disposal to protect Russian interests and avoid Russian defeat. So, if the Russian leadership realizes that it is on the verge of facing a defeat, it can turn into a nuclear war, because especially Russia can first and foremost initiate a tactical nuclear attack against Ukraine. And by extension, that once a nuclear attack is carried out, then I think it is just going to be a domino effect. And the other nuclear powers in the region, particularly France in EU and Great Britain in NATO, will also give an appropriate response to Russian nuclear attacks. Furthermore, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, its security is also under a lot of threat at the moment, as constant bombings and attacks are being carried around this nuclear power plant, and its power sources are also under threat. So if there is any damage to the nuclear facility and there is a nuclear spillover, then we can not only we will have another Chernobyl-like incident on our hands, but there is a huge probability that a nuclear war can also take place following that.
I hope it doesn't come to that. I really sincerely hope, because the consequences will be disastrous, not only for the region, but for the world at large. The Nord Stream gas pipeline sabotage in the Baltic Sea. The New York Times publishes an article and puts the blame on Ukrainian elements. How serious is this angle to the conflict as well?
Well, this should be taken seriously, because even previously some predictions or some, you can say, such kind of reports published by the New York Times or from the American media at large did prove to be true, down the line. But one has to see that who gained the most from the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines, because it is, in my humble opinion, I don't think so, it is Russia, because first and foremost, this attack was carried out in international waters and in the special economic zones of Denmark and Sweden. Both these countries are right now have completely adopted an anti-Russian stance, and they are the ones, or the collective West is the one to gain the most from the destruction of these energy pipelines, through which gas, vital energy sources were being sent from Russia to Germany. And as you are aware that in the past, Germany was reluctant in stopping energy imports from Russia through these pipelines, especially Nord Stream 1. And United States was the one which was actually convincing and coercing all the Europeans to cut off Russian energy sources completely. So it is in my opinion, it is the United States of America that had the most to gain from the destruction or the disruption of Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And even now, in the Baltic Sea, there is a lot of NATO naval vessel presence as well. So how is it possible that despite all the security measures and security apparatus of the NATO available inside the Baltic Sea, the Russians managed to enter into the zone and sabotage these energy pipelines? It must have been one of those countries which actually had access to the Baltic Sea waters and also had the intention and the motive to carry out such attacks.
And that is why I think the New York Times also, after, because a journal such as the New York Times does not publish and does not point fingers at any element without having concrete proof on that matter. So, of course, this raises a lot of questions as well. Now, let's talk about peace negotiations. Do you feel there's some kind of future in that? We know that there's the Turkey brokered peace deal happened recently, and there's a next level of talks that are going to be held on the 13th of March in Geneva. Any prospect of some kind of leeway, of some kind of progress as far as negotiations between these two factions are concerned?
Well, first of all, Omar Saab, there are two things. As far as the peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine are concerned, I think that there are no prospects for any such talks to take place in the near future, because neither side has any sort of operational, tactical, or strategic advantage against one another in order to enter into those negotiations from a position of strength. Both of them have entered into a stalemate on the ground, and both of them are waiting for launching their own respective spring offensives in order to gain some strategic advantages, so that they have more cards in their hands when they enter into negotiations. So I don't think so that neither Russia nor Ukraine are willing for any sort of peace negotiations as far as the war is concerned. On the second point, as you mentioned, the grain export deal that was signed between Russia and Ukraine for Ukrainian exports of wheat and grain to the rest of the world, brokered by Turkey and the United Nations back in July last year. I think there are prospects of its renewal. The prospects are very good, and I think even Russia, despite its own apprehensions regarding the deal, will go ahead and renew this deal, because it also knows that if Ukrainian grain does not make it out into the international food market, the food insecurity will exacerbate exponentially, and then all the goodwill that it has created, especially in the global south, and the support that it has gained in the global south, it will decimate if they realize that Russia is the one which is actually blocking all the grain that is vital for their food security. So I think that as far as the grain export deal is concerned, it will get renewed. But as far as the peace negotiations or the ceasefire is concerned, I don't see any prospects for it, at least in the coming few months.
Let's talk about Bakhmut. Why is Ukraine holding on to Bakhmut so strongly despite losing so many troops? What is the importance of this region?
Well, Bakhmut is one of the most vital fortified cities in the eastern Donbas region, especially in the Donetsk territory of Ukraine, that is half annexed by Russia in its last year November offensive, when in September, when there was also a referendum carried out and half of this territory was annexed by Russia and claimed as its mainland territory. Bakhmut is one of the strongest fortresses that the Ukrainian armed forces are currently holding on. It has proved vital for the Ukrainian armed forces in increasing the number of casualties or inflicting the number of casualties on Russian armed forces who are actually trying to take up the city, because they have realized that for President Putin, ever since the counteroffensive of the Ukrainian armed forces in September last year, the Russian forces have not captured any main city in its offensive against the Ukrainian armed forces. So Bakhmut, if captured by the Russian forces, which is very much likely in the coming weeks, since the Wagner mercenary group headed by Prigozhin has surrounded the city from three sides and only one side is left, and it will be captured in the coming weeks, since the Russians are heavily pounding the city and Ukrainian defenses. If it is captured, then the second line of defense of the Ukrainian forces, which is Bakhmut, will fall into the hands of the Russians, and it will be a major strategic victory for the Russians. And the Ukrainians will be deprived of a defensive position which enabled the Ukrainian armed forces to inflict heavy casualties on the Russians. So that is why Bakhmut is such an important region, and if overtaken by Russians, it will open way for the Russian armed forces to further move into the west of the Bakhmutova river, which is being held by the Ukrainian armed forces at the moment.
All right, this is interesting, and that is why maybe Ukraine is holding on to Bakhmut so vehemently. Speaking of war, how can we not talk of weapons? When you look at the number of countries that are supplying Ukraine with weaponry, the latest being Slovakia, it is going to send a MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine. Then Poland has delivered additional 10 Leopard 2A4 tanks that it had promised to Ukraine. Iran, we are also hearing, is supplying arms to Russia. Then there are EU countries that have agreed to speed up supplies of artillery rounds and buy more shells to help Ukraine. is this not going to create an arms imbalance in the region?
No, sir, I don't think so that it is going to create any sort of arms imbalance in the region, especially the European region, but it is definitely going to prolong the conflict. Because as I earlier mentioned, that both sides, the Ukrainians as well as the Russians, are preparing for their spring offensives because they have been waiting throughout the winter period to regroup, to at least re-strengthen their forces, to replan and restock their arsenals in order to launch their offensives after the snow melts down. So as the spring is slowly and gradually taking over, both the sides are almost on the brink of completing their preparations for launching those respective offensives against each other. And as Russians have also restocked their stockpiles, their weapons arsenals, the Ukrainians have also received massive amount of ammunition and military assistance from its allies, particularly the NATO allies, as well as particularly the United States of America. So if both sides are completely restocked and both sides have completely replenished their stockpiles, then we'll see more hostilities, more violence, and more destruction and more casualties on both sides. So although imbalance, I don't think so that there will be any sort of
But you mean, what you mean to say is all of this increase in arms supply to the different countries concerned is just going to prolong the state of war or conflict between the two countries. The US and Russia have been part of important deals like the START nuclear arms treaty. Although Russia backed out of it, but the Deputy Foreign Minister of Russia, Sergei Ryabkov, says Russia and the US have remained in contact over this important treaty. Any leeway, any possibility of Russia and the US talking again, discussing issues that concern both of them? Or do you feel there's going to be a stalemate in the majority of issues?
Well, definitely, you have to keep one thing in mind, that both when it comes to major powers like Russia and the United States of America and their own direct national security interests, they will always decide very pragmatically and engage each other in a very positive manner in order to have a constructive dialogue and avoid any sort of direct hostilities with each other, be it in the realm of conventional warfare or strategic weapons such as the nuclear weapons. So even if Russia has backed off from the START treaty, it will always, positively and constructively keep in touch and remain engaged with the United States of America for their own respective national security interests, despite their other, you can say, points of contention with each other. Even during the Russia-Ukraine war, I don't think so that they were ever completely disengaged with each other with regards to discussions on the nuclear weapons or the strategic posturing towards one another. Because the both of them know for a fact that it is going to be Armageddon if their dialogue deteriorates or if they don't engage each other in this domain. So I believe that despite all the different point of contentions that they have at the moment, Russia and US do have positive prospects in the coming future with regards to their nuclear programs.
Let's hope, Taimur, that these positive prospects also enlarge and diversify into positive prospects for both Ukraine and Russia. Somehow, somewhere, some country brokers a deal between the two countries, makes them sit on the dialogue table and thaw out these issues. This conflict is not in the interest of the world, it's not in the interest of the region. It might interest some particular states, but not the world. This is my point of view. I don't know whether you agree with me on that or not, but this in generality, I think wars or conflicts do not benefit anybody apart from certain quarters. Thank you so very much, Taimur Khan, Research Assistant at the ISSI, to have talked to us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you because you have such detailed answers to whatever I ask you. Thank you so very much. Let's come to our last story, and that concerns the United States, India and Pakistan. Ned Price says, while talking to media, that the US supports constructive dialogue between Pakistan and India to resolve disputes. Not the first time that the US side has said this, as far as the talking and talks between India and Pakistan. And there are so many issues between both these countries that need to be discussed and thought out. And on top of the list is the issue of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Many a times Pakistan has requested India to come to the talks table, and many a times India has refused. In fact, it has not only refused, but has also tried to malign Pakistan on different levels. Although this statement from Ned Price is very heartening, is positive. Let's hope some kind of constructive result comes as he has talked about constructive dialogue. Who knows, maybe in the coming months, India might finally accept a constructive dialogue on all issues between the two countries. We remain optimistic. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah on Monday with news stories and segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. Have a great weekend. If you are allergic to pollen, kindly take extreme care of yourself, get yourself vaccinated, or take extreme care by wearing your mask. That will also help against COVID-19. Allah Hafiz.